Imagine that you're in a car, and for the last 3 years, you've been in the passenger seat, but you've been shouting directions. Turn left, paint me a picture, write me a poem. And you felt like the captain because you were giving the orders. But the steering wheel wasn't yours. And now in 2026, the car has stopped listening to your voice. It just drives. It files your taxes while you sleep. It talks to your doctor while you're at work. And it trades your stock while you're at dinner. You aren't the captain anymore. You're the cargo. We are witnessing the death of the user and the birth of the operator. And the question that keeps me up at night it isn't whether the car will crash, it's whether we'll even notice it locks the doors. Today, we have an insider who's seen the code behind the curtain. And of course, y'all know and welcome Eric Post. What's up, buddy? How you doing?
It's up, man. I'm always waiting to see what your intros are going to be. It's like a little mix of a poem and some research, and yeah, I love it. So yeah, let's do it. What do you got? Where do you want to start first, man?
Yeah. I just want to get into this whole concept of the death of the user. I find really interesting. I feel like we're having a lot of paranoia being spun out of this intellectual curiosity. I feel for the last few years we've been playing with toys, and generative AI has been this party trick. Make me a funny image. A couple episodes ago we were doing the
shrimp Jesus,
the shrimp Jesus, and then the walrus Jesus.
Right.
Which is awesome. Very low stakes type stuff, but when we're talking about like agentic AI, I feel like we're going from the shift of generative to executive. We're handing over agency. At least that is the narrative, right? And then the software isn't just creating text anymore. It's taking action in the physical and digital world. It's executing. So that's where the paranoia is starting to stem from. And then you talk about liability. If a chatbot writes a bad poem, who cares? But if agentic AI liquidates your savings, right? Because they thought that the market was crashing, or books you for a surgery that you didn't need. Who is to blame in that scenario? We're kind of walking into this legal tightrope, and psychological minefield of software. And who really has more autonomy? We are effectively outsourcing our own volition, and it gets a little scary. So I want to just talk about that a little bit. Do you feel there will be some stopgaps installed? Because I haven't really seen any at this point.
Well, personally, I'm super excited about this because now we got to real world practical application. The problem with the whole thing is that there was this certain beautiful, wonderful marketing job by all these AI executives, knowing they needed to push adoption of the product early. And so the whole mantra was, if you don't use AI, your competitor is going to beat you, sort of thing, right? And this was the cliche thing. If you don't use AI, you won't be beaten by AI. AI won't take your job. But so your competitor using AI will. What a whole like marketing blame shift thing that they did to get us to compete, to use the product, to train their product so that AI could actually replace your job. You could see this thing all happening. And so they pushed everybody into their product to pay and fund and train the thing so it would be able to take your job pretty soon, right? It's just a wild time to watch. And there was a certain rush towards using things where like people were shipping things too early, over promising, under delivering. So that's going to continue. That Pandora's box has opened. It was not as scary until you get to the agentic side of things, like rushing, a ChatGPT 4 to market, isn't as bad. Although even just that, you saw that there was sort of like schizophrenia, uses, there was some mental illnesses it created. And, like the idea that it was lying caused this anthropomorphizing of it. People thought that it was sentient and conscious and all these things. So, society wasn't quite ready for a computer to spit words out on the screen because we've always kind of conflated words and the mastery of words with intelligence.
Yes.
When in this case, that's not true. For instance, there's a debate on, can an LLM do math or give the appearance of doing math? Right? Do we just have the appearance of it doing math, or is it actually doing math because it understands math, right? Or is the predictability of the algorithm so good that it gives you the appearance of knowing math? So there's lots of debates and discussions around that. But really, this rush does start to give me a little bit of like, when we get to the agentic, we saw this in agentic browsers and people just giving it, their files on their computer and everything, their passwords, and logging into everything. And there are stories of the agentic agents wiping this the computer free, and sending files that shouldn't have access to and send them those off. So yeah, Mo, where do you want to start? You want to start with kind of definition, make sure we understand the difference between a chatbot and agent, or where do you want to start?
That would be great. Yeah. What is the definition between a chatbot or an agent or a user and an operator?
Yeah, so just to make sure that we're all listening and on the same page, the ChatGPT 4 or ChatGPT 5.2 or whatever essentially is a chatbot. It's like a walking, talking encyclopedia, and an agent is more like a junior employee, or a Fiverr employee, let's say at this point in time. Okay, where the difference is, you have a question and answer. It lays dormant until you give it inference, until you ask a question, spins up, answers a question, produces token one word at a time in a regressive manner, looks back, and that's gives you the illusion of intelligence because it's using everything in context to give you the next word based on each word looking back to guess what the next word is. It's a beautiful math problem that we're watching. It's incredible, to be honest with you, but it's not AI in that way, and the way most people think of AI. By the way, buddy, if we've ever even talked about how the term AI is not even real, have we even talked about that on this podcast?
If we have, we probably blew right past it. So let's touch on that.
Yeah, just to be clear, the word artificial intelligence or the name artificial intelligence is always such a weird thing. We just accepted it. But if you look back where the origin was, I think it was in 1954, 1955. There was this college student in I think it was Dartmouth University actually, and they were trying to get funding. And then it was called autonomous operations, and had these very non-sexy terms, and he was trying to get funding for a project that he was trying to kind of portion off what his research was from everything else. And so he came up with the term artificial intelligence to get funding. The marketing thing is essentially to repackage what he was working on. So the first known documented word, use of artificial intelligence wasn't because of a technology. It was because of he needed to get funding through this for this product, for this program, and it stuck, right? So to be clear, ChatGPT is not AI. ChatGPT is a portal, a consumer portal to access OpenAI's large language models. Okay, just to be clear what we're talking about here. Where AI agents comes over, though, is that they have access to tools. So there's a couple of things that are different. One, they can sort of work recursively in loops where they can go a task and then check on their task to see how they're doing, and then go a little further and check on their task to see how they're doing, and they have access to tools. Tools being things like your CRM or your email or your calendar or online, right? Or to be able to access an API to get data and bring it back to you, or go online and bring it back to you, and it creates a checklist and it follows a checklist. So it's really a series of chatbots. If I just want to dumb down, just really simple, a series of chatbots that have access to tools. They talk in a recursive way to produce a result. So an earlier chatbot was you asked for a recipe, an agent might be able to make you the meal.
Right.
Right, as an analogy.
And now it's getting even more efficient to that point because I remember when we first started, you had to, I would ask the chatbot a question, but then I would ask it to ask me questions if it didn't understand, or ask me pre-qualifying or qualifying questions to be able to get it more depth, so that we can, it's definitely becoming more streamlined to the point where it will automatically do that, and or will just give you a list of variety of different things, different themes, what have you, which I find to be interesting.
You made a comment at the beginning, the death of the user. What did you say? The death of the operator? What did you say?
The death of the user and the birth of the operator.
So the term prompt engineering was born, a few years ago as the phrase of how do you talk to AI? What is the set of instructions that you get? We went from having to write code to interact with computers to be able to use our natural language. So in order to produce, a well-formed chunk of natural language that would help the chatbot be able to perform something, we call that prompt engineering. It's kind of the new way of coding. So we're really moving now from prompt engineering to agent orchestration, if you want to think of it that way, right? To agent management. So for instance, in the backside of Huzi, we have a new product coming out. It's called SparkPad, where we essentially spin up a swarm of AI agents to help perform a task. And in order to build that up, we have a swarm of 6 or 7 AIs that are agents working in parallel to produce the swarm. So they are doing a task. So we'll give them a task, and then they each spin up their task and then pass on the results to the next one, to the next one, to the next one to fulfill the whole project instead of me having to prompt each one. Right. And so it's much smarter. And of course, a lot of the technology that's been able to do this isn't just in the advancements of the LLMs, but it's in the advancements of the chips and the compute as well. Right. So our limit on what we're able to do this way is not so much in the technology as it is how fast can we bring more servers online to handle all this processing. How fast can we build more chips and increase the efficiency, the effectiveness, and decrease the cost of running each inference or building new models, right? So it's really the bottleneck is in the compute, not so much. My personal belief is in the technology. We have some other limits, and we can probably talk about the limits of training data and whatnot. But really, right now, it's how fast can they build the servers.
So I actually have a follow-up question. So whether or not, without getting too technical, API keys, this, that, the other, you have these large language models. You've got, OpenAI has ChatGPT, Google has Gemini, Anthropic has Claude. But there are dozens, if not hundreds, of AI tools that are borrowing this technology in order to manipulate or create a new version or a specified version of a tool in order to help produce a result or fill a need for a specific gap. What I've found is, just like any technology, right? Any kind of new development that comes into play, there's always going to be the technology itself, like gasoline, as an example, is a fuel. Whoever developed it, created it, found it, discovered it, doesn't matter. I developed a car, I'm using that fuel in order to power this car. It doesn't mean that the fuel itself isn't a lesser thing, or that my car is a lesser thing. It's just, this is the vehicle, right? So the way that I'm looking at AI now, viscerally, is that these guys that are developing this tech, they're the fuel. And people like yourself are utilizing this fuel in order to build something substantial. And at this point, there's so much competition, but a lot of these tools, they're just an afterthought. They're vibe coded, they're developed overnight. They're trying to release a concept, maybe get some funding or whatever. I'll disclose this. I've had access to the new SparkPad. And I'll tell you this, what I find most interesting is how much thought has went into it and the utilization of so much specificity. The things that you want in what you would use a typical chatbot, without even thinking, they're there. And all the concepts and all the iterations and all the things that you've hoped and wished that it would do, it does it. And that's what I think really separates a phenomenal tool versus an everyday tool. Because I can use Google Docs, but I can also use some third-party note taker that is pre-installed on my computer. It doesn't allow the same leverage. It doesn't give me the same value, right? And that's kind of now how I'm starting to look at this whole AI tech revolution thing, is that AI is just fuel, but there are builders and founders like yourself that are actually starting to build that vehicle in order to leverage this fuel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, man. I'll tell you, it's really hard. So there's a lot of debate, like what is a defensible moat in building software anymore, or building a company, even building a company anymore. Is it integration? Is it data? Is it branding? Is it trust? Is it your interface? What is it? What are the defensible moats these days when you can spin up complicated software that used to take 2 years to build and build it in a week? Each engineer, a reasonable engineer today with Claude Code as an example, just from 12 months ago is probably a 5x improvement. And that's fairly conservatively in terms of output and quality of code written by a single engineer.
Right.
5x is a pretty reasonable number, I'm saying.
So you're saying that 5x is you're being like conservative.
I'm typically like with even our small engineering team we have here at Huzi, we've probably gone in the last 12 months 15x in the amount of cost of tokens that we're using to write code. Probably 15 X simply because the quality of the code is better. And we've now developed a little more trust and a little more expertise on how you now take one of my senior engineers from, let's say he was writing 100 or 200 or even 500 lines of codes a day. Now he's managing 4 code agents, and they might write 20,000 lines of code, in 24 hours.
That's
you know,
insane.
yeah, and I'm using that number a little bit loosely, but
Yeah.
I'm telling you, it's such a substantial increase. It's hard to comprehend in that way. Now, that could be taken. I want people to hear me clear. That could be taken as it's running loose and foot free, or a little you're running a little loose or whatever. Or where's your QA and you're running unit tests, and yeah, with all of the really engineering best practices in play. That's why we were a little bit slower, I think, than some of the earlier firms to really power your engineers heavily, simply because of the knowledge of how much extra work goes into code when you screw it up the wrong way, and and it causes a mess. And so now, though, with 4.5 and above and Haiku, it's not like Anthropic's done such a great job of tuning their LLMs, tuning their models to have a specific expertise, and they've done a really nice job in the specific expertise of code writing. And so you see now, man, that Claude Code, co-work. The amount of the adoption rate that's happening right now with Claude and Google both is actually a faster and a quicker adoption rate than what happened for OpenAI over the last couple of years, just recently.
I'm noticing that. I mean, even like the quality of like what you're like the output that you're able to get, right? Coding aside, conversationally, intellectually, dynamically, what they're able to produce. Like, I don't think I've touched OpenAI personally in like 3 months.
And obviously still a great product and all that stuff,
Right.
but that's why a product like ours is kind of fun for our users, because we have the best models in there for their use.
Yeah.
So you do like 5.2 thinking from OpenAI, you can use that for a project in the same conversation. If you didn't want to switch because you like the way Claude 4.5 Sonnet writes, then you can just switch and then have it write. And then if you want, for instance, like Gemini 3 is a great, it's great at producing. I don't know. I think Gemini 3 is kind of an all-around beast. It can do a lot, really, really well. So then if you want to take that and turn it into like a really well-researched and thoughtful white paper, all in the same chat, one of our users can switch between the models, all in one chat to produce the thing. And so you just, you're starting to see people understand that these different large frontier models have different aspects that are good and not as good as the others.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if you sit down and you just say, okay, I am a ChatGPT user, you're really missing out on the leverage of just AI in general, and being able to understand the quality and what the different attributes are in some way. And that's through the consumer portals, or that's using the APIs both, so for them. So I would definitely suggest that people get very familiar kind of with what they're good and bad at, and be able to at least, say, okay, today I need a Toyota truck. Tomorrow I need a Camry, and the next day, I want an MR2. Remember the old MR2s? Remember the old little MR2s? I'm just pulling some out of the past, but more like a Porsche, right? Like you might, or a mountain bike versus a road bike, right? They're all bicycles, but a beach cruiser is way different than a downhill mountain bike, right? And yet people say, oh, I'm learning to ride a bike. Like I'm learning to code, or I'm learning to use AI. Still, there's nuances to all those things. So I'm very optimistic about not all of the value being abstracted all the way to the top to just the frontier models. I do think that there's players that are gonna, like I hope to be one of them, that has an industry niche with a certain integration into an area where one of those large frontier models just simply doesn't have the interest or the expertise to drill down that far, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the Miata was trying to do the MR2, and it ended up being like a like an old, like every 70-year-old lady. Like I can't tell you how many friends in high school their grandparents had a Mazda Miata
with Momo wheels.
Yeah. Literally. Like it's just like, oh my God.
Yeah,
They're
no.
just trying to do something. I was like, you trying to be a Porsche? You trying to do the MR2? Like, what's going on?
Yeah,
Anyway, it's
yeah.
just kind of funny. So you touched on a little bit on Anthropic, and I don't like to dig in the dirt too much. I just thought this was interesting, and I wanted to bring it to attention to gain your perspective. Publicly, Microsoft tells every enterprise client to buy GitHub Copilot, excuse me.
Yeah.
They sell it as a gold standard, but the leaks are saying that Microsoft is telling its own engineers to use Cloud Code to benchmark their work.
Yeah.
So it's like the guy selling you the shovel is secretly using a different shovel to dig its own hole. Makes zero sense. So like, all right, so you see in the internal benchmarks, is this A/B testing an admission that OpenAI's architecture has hit a wall, or is it just like hey, I need a sovereign model, like Mistral in Europe to be able to be safe from U.S. surveillance, which is, by the way, interesting. Like I've been testing out a lot of these, like Kimi and DeepSeek and some of these Chinese models, which is very interesting. Is it Kimi? I think it's
Yeah,
Kimi.
Kimi K2.
Yeah, which has been interesting. And then Mistral, I haven't looked into yet, but there's quite a bit of other things like to consider. Not to say that that's better or worse, but is it a sovereign thing? They want to have zero surveillance. Are we talking about internet fracture into American AI? Is it because they think Anthropic's Claude is better? And I don't know. I think it is, because I wouldn't want to use GitHub Copilot over Anthropic. You know what I mean?
Well, they're both great, but I think if I'm to guess, I'm not in those boardrooms, so this
I know
isn't
this is all hyperbole. Like this,
yeah, because of the unprecedented pressure and competition that every CEO and every senior level manager at all these companies are looking for any way they possibly can to stay or get ahead. And so using another model or mixing models up or like doing something behind the scenes, like unfortunately the pressure, the competitive pressure for literally hundreds of billions of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, that's a number that's factually hard to even comprehend, are on the line here. And so there's so much happening behind the scenes. We have no idea. That's just simply gives you a little glimpse into the desperation of sorts to be relevant.
what would you compare like Mistral AI to? If it would be out of the US based LLMs, because in terms of pricing, they're, at least I think for the pro models, are like $5 to $10 less. Like, would that be? Plus, you get to call it Le Chat.
You can tell with video, but like we actually use Kimi K2 behind the scenes mode, just so you know.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so think about these models as well. So some of the models and open source models, you can actually run them locally. You don't have to like get an API and tap in somewhere, pay for those calls, or you can actually run them locally to do certain things. Kimi K2 is a really cool, just a fast model. There's some politics in all this too. Like we don't serve up models like DeepSeek or Kimi K2 because there's some political pressure of like, oh, that's a Chinese model, or they're stealing my data, or it's going to Bangkok or Beijing or whatever. Like that's just not anything I want to be part of or need to worry about, because we've got some great models here in the models we've already talked about. So, but behind the scenes, Kimi K2 is a relatively inexpensive, and it's lightning fast for a few things. And so to generate, text for tests and things like that, it's really fantastic. But it's not something that we use in the product public facing. So, understanding, the cost of the models, the benefit of the models, the sort of the rubric of what they're good at, that's something we're trying to be very, very good about and thoughtful about, so we can produce a great product and produce great responses for our users when they're inspecting those, and safe, and as reliable as possible, with as much uptime as possible, the least, interruption as possible, the least, hallucinations as possible, and things like that. So
how is something like a DeepSeek or a Kimi K2? I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong here, but even their pro models are almost free, if not free, minus like maybe the code portion.
Oh yeah, we're also, just so you know, behind all the scenes, we're also in like a Cold War era sort of thing. So when they came out, they dropped DeepSeek like they did. That was a Cold War era sort of move. That wasn't a technology business move. That was, we're going to disrupt the thing that's buoying your stock market, the same, the thing that everything, 94% of gains or whatever is a result of the, the direct impact of, AI and those businesses in our stock market gains and whatnot. So they're like, hey, let's F that up. We're going to drop those models almost free and like show how fragile, the American infrastructure is in AI and things like that. So it wasn't just a business move and just see how many downloads they can get of apps and to steal your data. There was definitely a Cold War era move there to disrupt the billions and billions of dollars that are at stake here.
No, I completely believe that. I wanted to transition a little bit, but it kind of ties into it. Like, so Google's Gemini 3, which their deep research, which I've done I've used quite exhaustively because I do that for these things and other ventures. And I found it to work as not just a junior analyst, but almost, I would say halfway between a junior and senior analyst, because it is so good, especially if you can follow up with the right questions and the detail and what have you. And for productivity, it has just been tremendous. Now, once it's able to gather details of what Answer the Public or Answer Socrates, some of these other far more comprehensive detail, what are people actually saying in the interweb, social media, be able to gather that data and then put it in a way where, because what I like about like an Answer the Public is that you kind of get this web and you're able to see dynamically what people are saying, how they're saying it, how often it's being said, what are the things, where does it spike? Those kind of things are, and I'm sure I could do that in Canvas that you have, Satori. But if we automate this grunt work, the research, the synthesis, the organization, my way of thinking is we've had to establish this type of thinking brain. How does the next generation ever learn to think? Are they learning a different way of thinking? Is it going to be more proactive, more instructional? Or are we kind of like engineering a workforce of editors, not just writers who have to become editors? It's like a different, I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm explaining this right. It's a level of competence. You know what I mean?
There's a few ways to slice it, and I'll slice it in parallel to what has happened before.
Yeah.
So what happened before, we talked about public school systems and whatnot.
Right.
There were systems that were created because of the way the economy was and the Industrial Revolution was and the direction of our country and the way the technology was sitting, that they produced factories of kids, that needed to have a certain mindset to churn over the huge flywheel of the U.S. economy. And so the school system, everything was designed to produce factory workers and assembly line workers and the mindset to be in that mode. Okay. Meanwhile, the elites at that time didn't send their kids to schools to be that way. They were reading philosophy and they were painting and they're writing poetry and they're doing other sorts of schoolwork and scholastic learning, but it wasn't in the same rote, memorization, raise your hand, you must sit in the class, you must do the things, right? You're going to sit in a box, sit in your chair, shut up, get in line. When the bell rings is the only time you can leave, sort of programming. That wasn't what the elites did, okay? And they didn't put their kids to school there. Now, the same thing's sort of happening again, where I think that what's happening is in the same way where we have a consumption economy and we have a creator economy. I'm not just talking on social media, but
right,
in general.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's a consumption mindset and programming that's happening right now. And there's a creator mindset and programming that's happening right now. And a lot of that is being done on the socioeconomic divide, on lines that way. So when we talk about like thinking in the same way we talked a couple of podcasts about, you can see the statistics of screen time on a phone being divided that way, that poor families definitely have more flat screen time than rich families do, as an example. Same thing is happening with AI usage. We're seeing some of the like higher end schools going back to the philosophy and painting and arts and things like that. And the other people are going to be basically intertwined with the AI in some way in their life. It's one of my predictions, and I think we'll see that to be true. But all this, guessing is not so much guessing when you can look at just simple patterns throughout history. They're simple patterns. They just were wearing different costumes at the time, you know? So technology continues to disrupt because we have an imagination that's so grand. We have, you know, we have these wild imaginations, and those that thinketh doeth, you know, and you can imagine something, we can bring it into existence and eventually. It's these wild, you know, obsessions. And right now you can see it. You can see it in these tech CEOs twinkle in the eye when they talk about creating AGI or ASI.
Right.
They talk about a world with this super intelligent thing that they help give birth to. It's really fascinating psychologically to watch them be so fixated on being a part of what they believe the most fundamental, greatest invention of human creation ever. Right. And so, what a megalomaniac does it take to get there? And again, I'm not trying to say that this whole thing is good or bad because there's nothing that doesn't, it's not relevant. But that is a weird, I've just been noticing this fascination with wanting to talk to something so much smarter than themselves, you know, wanting to interact with something so much smarter than themselves. But I will say, you know, they have to have that level because they are promising their shareholders massive gains, and they again raising hundreds of billions of dollars. So they have to have that level of insanity that this is going to happen. However, in our lifetimes alone, there's been multiple places in history, Mo, where we have been told, well, in the next 10 years, we're going to have computers smarter than us.
Right.
This is not a new story. We just forget about the old stories. So now the debate is, well, can an LLM or current versions with their current, you know, infrastructures and neural networks and all those things, are those even the foundational elements of what we've defined as AGI or ASI?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, you know, I don't know. I don't think the current infrastructure will get us there. I don't see that happening because hallucinations, as an example, is a feature, not a bug of a current LLM. You know, and so I don't think we can have AGI or ASI until that's a completely different sort of architecture with a fundamentally different premise for the way it ingests the world. Right. So right now it's a very 2D understanding of the world. It doesn't actually know what physics is. It can just give us the illusion that it understands physics because it can do the calculations, but it can't experience physics. So it's really hard to have an AGI ASI without the experience of physics. It's just one small example.
No, I appreciate that thoughtful response. I've been playing in my head. You know, these questions aren't my. Sometimes they're aligned with what I believe or what I think or my experience. But most of the time, these are questions that I find collectively are being asked. And one thing that strikes me, you've touched on this before. I think you posted this, I don't know, a year or two ago. I don't remember. But, you know, how everybody's like, oh, everybody's looking down on their phones nowadays. Nobody's paying attention to the real world. And you put a side by side where, you know, this is like 1950 and everybody was sitting on a train glued to their newspapers.
Yeah.
You know, no communication. So it's just like, it's the same. The thing that is triggering me right now, where we talked about, you know, how you have to have some sort of competence. What does it look like in terms of like research, because you have access to AI? But if you look at how the education system is set up, and I'm not going to get into a deep dive here, but you go to school, it's not learning. The idea is that you learn how to learn, but even that I think is fallible. And the majority of the time, you're not learning how to learn or learn at all. I think you're just learning how to memorize information. And whether it be an encyclopedia or a textbook or Google or AI, you're memorizing information and some concept, just like through grade school, high school, college, doesn't matter. You're essentially renting knowledge. And I can't tell you how many doctors I know, how many lawyers I know, how many pharmacists I know that tell me I just had to get through it, memorize it, and then the real work begins. I don't apply 90% of what I learned in school. Mm-hmm. Yes, some factual information. Yes, you know, but a lot of that stuff it becomes learning through osmosis, especially like a doctor. Like if you're becoming a physician, you have to learn, you know, the terminology and all that stuff, biology, anatomy, whatever. But most of the time, like you're forgetting most of the stuff and it's not really applicable. It's just like it's getting you to that next phase. So isn't AI just getting us to that next phase? Aren't we just still renting knowledge to be able to
Mm.
get us to the next phase? That is just a question that is popping up
Well,
in my head.
as it is, LLMs are insanely as a productive tool, when applied appropriately. So
Right.
any, thing that I say about its limitations doesn't take away from the advancements it's made and
Hmm.
the beautiful discoveries that it's unlocked and the cancer, that it has seen and caught before the doctor did, and like all these are great stories we shouldn't bury in all of this.
Totally.
Um, but it isn't exactly what the CEO that needs to convince you that needs to raise $400 billion this year is, to be
Hmm.
clear.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so that's to be true. Now, it's also exposing a lot of things, like you're talking about using, like research and whatnot. So, McKinsey, the huge consulting AI
Yep.
firm, right?
Hmm.
Just so you know, they surpassed 1 billion OpenAI tokens in usage in a single month.
God. I mean, they're a big company, but still.
So my point is, but they're hired to do this deep research as human experts. These Ivy League students that are meant to be able to digest data and interpret data in a way that these massive corporations can make these big decisions upon. And then it got exposed that they used 1 billion tokens in a month, and there's some reports, or there's some obvious hallucinations in the reports because they just didn't double check the work, and they took the generation from ChatGPT and included in the report and whatnot. So it's just fundamentally, people are saying, well, why would I give you $250,000 to this research thing if you're handing it off to ChatGPT almost? Okay, but 1 billion tokens in a month is quite a bit. And so I just, what has happened is we've really seen the value of knowledge collapse and the value of a particular niche expertise exponentially increase is what we're seeing. And the other fundamental thing that's changing is that, like, as an example, as an engineer, all of there's double the now people looking for jobs, and there's half as number of engineers being posted on Indeed as there was a few years ago. A great engineer that can now orchestrate AIs commands a really great wage, right? So it's not, people are saying, oh, it's taking all engineers' job or whatever. Yeah, and there's probably a good point to be said that nearly almost every line of code now at Claude, they're saying that things like 95% and 99% of all code that they write now is all written by their own AIs. So like Claude Cowork was actually supposedly written 100% by Claude Code, which is
That's so they build the machine that then builds the machine.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
you build a computer so that you can essentially write software, right? It's like you can't necessarily write software without a computer. You can't really write anything without a keyboard. And then eventually, whether it be digital or physical, I don't
Hmm.
know. It's it to me, it's nothing new. It's just an advancement of the tech itself. But it's the same cycle that we've been going through, right? In
I don't.
essence?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think well, there's the same capitalistic sort of cycle with hype, burst, bubble, and flatline, and then you find the footing and you find out what's real and what's not real amongst all the hype, and then you can really build a solid infrastructure from there. So that's normal, and that's what we're going through that, and we'll see what kind of bursting there, what happens. Where does this whole thing pop in some way? Because there is a correction in some way, and that's necessary. That's healthy.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, forest fires suck, but the forest has to have a forest fire to cleanse things out. And so cycles and seasons are important. And I've never bet on OpenAI to win this race. Even early on, I was always betting on Google or some dark horse that we hadn't even heard of yet to win,
Mm.
uh, just based on the infrastructure of how things are fundamentally laid out and who has access to data and who has access to resources already. And so even though Google was like struggling, way, way, way hard at the beginning, they were completely irrelevant in this whole race. Now they're really picking up, and they're doing the deal with Apple, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
they were on to OpenAI was at the table. They kicked OpenAI to the curb and went with Google, right? So, that was a blow to it.
It was-
But people are saying like, oh, well, Apple, fundamentally, fumbled this whole thing, and Apple really screwed the pooch and all that stuff. I'm not certain that's true, actually. I'm not certain that Tim Cook isn't a genius and he realized what they're really good at and what they're not good at. I'm not sure he's not looking back and thinking, man, they're going to spend $400 billion figuring this out. Why don't I just let them figure it out and I'll use the technology?
that part. Yep.
Right.
Mhm.
I'm not certain he's not one of the smartest guys around to have figured this out and knows where his lane is and how to leverage whatever the people are doing and then where their fit is in this. And I'm thinking he's looking at what the hardware play is in all this.
He doesn't have to build it. He's renting the intelligence instead of building it. Like you looked at the fact that they're spending nearly $500 billion,
Yeah.
right?
I'm
Like that,
pretty sure he knows the cost is going to go down and what they need it for. Like, for example,
right,
to run in their devices, to run Siri, they don't need ChatGPT 9,
right.
to run Siri, right? For most people, ChatGPT 4.0 was a great companion and a chat assistant.
Hmm.
And they were, in fact, pissed when 5 launched because it
Hmm.
felt cold. And those people knew that the intelligence was good enough in 4 for the general consumer usage. So I don't know, man. I think that they're making the play for the hardware play, and they'll be smart about it. And then as the cost goes down, then they'll put their shoe in the ring in another way.
Yep. And we touched on a lot of good stuff, and we have so much more to cover. That's going to be in the following episodes. So I appreciate everybody that's been jumping on here. We do want to get into the rapid fire section. If you're cool with that, Eric, I don't know how much time you have left. I
Hit
just
me.
I love this section. People love this section, so I just want to dive right into it. Question number one: one skill you're refusing to let an algorithm do for you this year.
The skill of breaking down a problem for myself instead of saying, give it to ChatGPT or give it to Huzi or give it to whatever and saying, hey, tell me how to do this thing. I really am trying to be thoughtful about it first because I cannot manage or orchestrate a swarm of AIs unless I understand the problem that they're working on
Okay,
fundamentally.
so you discover you essentially try to problem solve, or you problem solve first and then you expand on that.
I try to know the lattice that's necessary to build
Okay.
whatever I'm trying to understand the lattice because like as a beautiful side product of working with AI just all day every day over the last 3 years is I'm a better communicator with my kids. I'm
Mm,
a better instructor of tasks
yes.
in those ways. When I taught a class yesterday and I found myself breaking down a problem much more comprehensively and thoughtfully than I have been in years past. Because in order to be successful with an LLM, you have to really give it a chance to succeed. And so there you have to be the expert to help it guide. And then it's just leveraging you so you could get it done faster, but you understand every step along the way. And it's just providing you kind of fuel, the little turbocharger. I'm
Mm,
not handing any of that over yet. So for this year, man, it's like really understanding how to break down the complex problem, understanding basic frameworks for like Six Sigma, Blue Ocean,
mhm.
Ada, OODA loops, right? Really understanding fundamental business frameworks that I can apply problem solving to. And lastly, uh, um, some sort of mastery of our natural language. I'm continuing to like want to learn, increase my vocabulary, increase my understanding of NLP, increase my
Mhm.
understanding of how syntax affects an LLM, and so what these sort of generations, if I want to get a great or novel generation, how do I then interact in such a way that it makes that happen?
By
So
NLP, do you mean neuro linguistic programming or some
yeah,
other?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hmm. Awesome. I have a funny question for you.
I do. I love. Okay,
If
good.
if your if if your phone or your LLM specifically knows you better than your spouse, who do you trust more in a crisis?
I'm going to go for the first time ever in the history of rapid fire. I'm going to say no comment.
That's probably smart bet.
or,
Next,
or insert anybody. I know it's just a funny,
yeah, for
you
sure.
know.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I think that
yeah,
was a smart play.
yeah. I think
Um,
no comment.
I've already asked you this question before in our podcast, but it's coming up again right now. It's in the interwebs, which I find interesting because I thought we've moved past this, but the whole concept of prompt engineering, people are still asking if it's dead or if it's a viable career path, which is really interesting because
What do you think?
especially Reddit. Reddit is like there are hundreds of subreddits on prompt engineering to this day where they're trying to find value in that specific skill set. But I was under the understanding that it's kind of like we've already moved on. Like this thing can kind of do its own thing,
It,
especially Huzi.
it can, and yeah, thank you. I mean, it can, but I do think it's too early for
Okay.
sure. Yeah, I do, Matt. And the reason why I'm pausing, because like an example in our Canvas product, Mo, we built the prompt studio.
That's what I'm
So
saying. You built a
yeah,
prompt studio.
so my point is, like, I recognize it's still a required skill, and so instead of making somebody learn how to do it, I kind of provide a tool there where you can just essentially fill out a form and it generates a thoughtful, comprehensive, well-formed prompt that you just hit the button to run the prompt. But you didn't have to spend the time to actually generate or create the prompt. Is a great little hack, but it still kind of actually proves the point that prompting is still very important, and thoughtful prompting that's structured in a way that that particular LLM
Got it.
is
Okay.
structured is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, so that makes sense. What is a specific agentic capability that scares you the most right now? Or just in general? If there is any. If there's not, then we can just go to the next question.
No, not really. I'm gonna always go to the deep fake, thing.
Yeah.
So you spinning up a deep fake and says it's Mo Naboulsi, and I can point it at your entire family all through social media, and it sends them all personal messages. It sounds just like you, has a picture of you in trouble, all this stuff. Like you can do that with agentic, capabilities. And I don't love that idea. That's not it. That sucks. And I do think part of it has to do with what I'm scared about is people using technology. They don't know how it works. And so they don't know how to safeguard themselves, like using agentic browsers and not understanding how they can be prompt injected from a site on the internet. Not knowing that is insane to me. And yet they install it, apply it, and start like letting it loose without understanding what the possible downsides are. So I think just make sure when you use an advanced technology that you actually know what the downsides are.
I agree. And the last question,
Okay.
one thing humans do that an AI agent will never be able to replicate.
I mean, we're so weird. Like the shrimp Jesus example, right? We're just
Right.
so weird. And I don't use weird as a bad terminology. Weird as like hard to define. And so, when you have something that is based on an algorithm, which is what an LLM is, even though now we went from 175 billion parameters to 3 to 5 trillion is what they have now, and they don't even measure them by parameters anymore. That was also a marketing thing in the beginning. It's like, oh, you have 175? Oh, well, we have 300 billion parameters. And there was a flex off for parameters the first few years, if you remember that whole thing.
I don't actually. What was
Oh
it?
yeah, like it would come out. They say this is a 175 billion parameter model, and this is a 5 billion parameter model, and that was how they gave us the understanding of how large the models were. Okay, was by that, so you understood, and so now like 5.2 is somewhere between 3 and 5 trillion parameters, and what I mean by that is, have you heard of like what a weight is in an LLM? Like when somebody says the weights inside of an LLM?
No.
Okay, so just for fun, imagine like 100 billion tiny little dots. Okay, and each one of those is a parameter. And imagine each one of those dots having a little dial on them, and you can
Okay.
tune them in like they're all little knobs. Imagine 100 billion knobs, like a big soundboard or something like that, because you like music, right? Each one of those are tuned, and each one of them has math. So when you ask a question, it runs through those, and based on the tuning of those is what you get the answer back. Okay, so the weights affect, like if you have everything set to 0, all the knobs set to 0, and I ask a question like let's say what is 2 plus 4? It would say purple cat, giraffe, target, tree in the moon.
Oh wow.
Right? It would make no sense because there's no tuning, there's no
Got it.
adjusting. The model doesn't have any weights. It hasn't. Okay, so that's how you get this sort of illusion. I don't want to say illusion of intelligence because it's not fair. It's a very smart system. But when we say intelligence, we anthropomorphize it. It's not intelligence the way we think of intelligence. It's very smart because the algorithm is there. So what I'm trying to suggest is that you can't have a lot of weirdness in when it's an algorithm like that,
No, no,
right?
it makes sense. It's like you without the tune, like you're tuning a note, and otherwise it could be
Yeah,
sharp or flat.
sure.
It doesn't have any context. Is that what you're saying? Essentially?
Correct. It's just
Okay.
it's these each, and then basically pre-training, post-training, like, and I also think people should understand that when you're talking to AI, you're
Hmm.
not the only one talking to that large language model.
What
What
do
I
you mean?
mean by that is if you're talking to a large language model through ChatGPT, there's a system prompt
Mm.
that's being injected into each one of your questions or each one of your thoughts or whatever into that's also simultaneously talking to the model to give you the response back. So whatever the instructions are in those system prompts is why it might be political or not, or might be able to generate an image with boobs or not, right? You talk to Grok, you can generate an image with boobs. You talk to OpenAI, you can't generate an image with boobs. It's not because of the model capacity, it's because of system prompt,
Hmm.
that they've layered in between you and the model capacity. Make sense?
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. That
Yeah,
makes
so that's
sense.
the important thing to really know that you're not the only one talking to models if you're using a consumer portal to talk to an AI. That system prompt is in there, affecting the responses.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting. So I'm glad that you shared that with us.
It's really nice to know, man. Because you put a tool, if I hand you a chainsaw and don't explain the dangers of it, it's not. I'm not very good. I'm not a very
Right.
good instructor. I'm not a very good father, right? And yet they're handing us these tools without these like knowledge of what this stuff is, and it's a little wild.
Yeah, it gets pretty intense. It's like, here, I need you to saw this piece of wood, and then you hand me a drill.
Yeah,
It doesn't make any sense.
it's kind of like what's happening. Like, hey, I need to do this thing. Oh, I'll just use ChatGPT for it. Maybe or maybe not. That's the right tool, So I think that what we're starting to see is the specialization of AIs or the tuning or fine tuning of the AIs for a particular thing. And so, like companies, like when we talked in the real estate space or some of the niches that we have, the reason why they are choosing us over another company is not because we have the billions of dollars of resources, is because we can tune the thing so their users don't have to be so good at prompt engineering to get a good response. So if you take, let's say you have the whole ball of an OpenAI large language model and use ChatGPT, it's kind of like using the whole thing because it's generic in there. It's like using all of it for your consumer purposes. But like, let's say we might use the whole thing, but we've essentially, through some of the conversations, sort of like portioned off a piece of it. So you're able to like get a more robust expertise like answer than kind of a milk toast best answer that's been on the internet sort of thing. And that's important. Either become a great prompt engineer and really understand how to do that, or use one tuned and trained and specialized for what your application is. It should be a thoughtful, approach to using AI.
Or just use Canvas prompting tool that you have. Kind of
I
just,
think it's great. I use it all the time,
I,
man.
I use it all the time. I honestly didn't, you know what's funny? I didn't even know it was there until, I don't know if it was the podcast where you mentioned it. No. I think you were instructing, like, it was a work call or something. I can't remember. I'm like, I didn't even know that fucking existed. Like,
Yeah,
what?
and there's one for the image generator too.
I didn't
So
know. Yeah, I didn't know that. I'm like, dude, what? I kept it to
yeah,
myself because I felt like I was just like, oh God.
yeah.
All right.
Sorry, that's
No,
on
that's
me.
my bad. I
Jeez
that was,
Louise.
that was that was another thing. Listen, man, I so appreciate these conversations. Are always so phenomenal. And listen, everybody that is listening today, the industry thrives on noise because confusion is profitable. And if you're ready to find the signal, I do want to mention Project Satori bypasses the industry futile cycle of endless training by directly installing a proprietary done-for-you infrastructure. It bridges the gap between abstract strategy and concrete execution. The system leverages over 2.5 million in research to transform established commission earners into dominant market authorities through automated AI engines and operational order. If you're interested, you want to check it out, you want to understand it more, head over to heyhuzi.com. And for everyone that's listening, you can find us everywhere that you can listen to your podcast: Spotify, iHeartRadio, the interwebs, Apple Podcasts. We're there. We love you. See you next time. Eric, it's been great, man. Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody.